Good evening. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to dedicate this video journal to my mother, Lorraine Seymour. Lorraine was not from a single mother household. She had two parents and lived on Fitz Street in the city of Syracuse in 1978 and attended the school on the corner, which we now call Delaware Primary. She gave birth to me, her only daughter, a short time after leaving elementary school at the age of 17. Lorraine never had a chance to get a job or go to college. Without the skills she needed to survive, the drugs, gangs, and guns she found in her community followed her everywhere, and ultimately, these things took her life before she turned 20. Like the rest of the city of Syracuse, Lorraine's parents were poor. When the Syracuse Police Department went looking for Lorraine on a misdemeanor prostitution warrant, her parents believed they were doing the right thing when they insisted that Lorraine skip town rather than confront the unknown consequences of turning herself in. Lorraine left New York State with a family friend, never to be seen alive again. Her parents never forgave themselves, and the grandchildren she never got a chance to meet are still dealing with the impacts and the trauma related to her death today in 2024. That being said, that is part of the reasoning why when I chose to write the Family Task Force Handbook or the Finding Your Family Task Force Handbook, I included a chapter on guns and gangs, and I also added a letter to the union in this chapter. You see the table of contents on your screen as proof that these things are covered in the book I've written. And you also see a picture of me and my mom. We were both around the age of 17 at the time those pictures were taken. Of course, they were taken very separately because she had been passed away for quite some time. By the time I turned 17, she was murdered when I was 3. So, with that in mind, I do feel obligated to put out a disclaimer here before we begin this discussion that I am not a drug counselor. I do not have any kind of social work degree. Um, and a lot of times when people talk about these things, and those are the types of background you expect people to have. My background in these things is a little bit different, but I don't think that makes it any less valuable. I have 30 some odd years firsthand experience of dealing with guns and gangs and drugs and the impact that they can have on a family. And one of the things that I feel makes me unique is in some ways, not always, but in some ways, I have successfully navigated these challenges and of course corrected a little bit and broken some of the generational curses and stresses that come with these things. Not all of them, and some of them I'm not sure we're ever going to break, but a lot of them as far as maintaining a job and healthy boundaries and things of that nature I have successfully done. So, and I help my children in doing those things as well. So, as we talk about our local headlines this evening and as we get into our critical thinking discussion about Syracuse City School District in the year 2024, um, I just want to be clear on my position and my perspective and what it is I bring to the table. All right, so we're going to start here and set the tone with this. This is from last week's Board of Education work session.
Lends to the opportunity for it to be disproportionate. But I think that we need to do a better job of educating the adults on how to handle those situations. Any of those substances in the hands of a child under the age of 18 is illegal.
I
And
completely
so
agree.
I think that if we can do a better job in the PD and how we talk to our administrators about what instances are level two, what's a level three, what's a level four. I think that that goes a long way towards that. And again, this is a policy document, so it has to be broad. Um,
I
Trying to
just am
find the
concerned.
specific language. It's not on 27.
The thing is, though, you for use, you don't know if they're using. The thing they say is, I was in the car with somebody that was smoking. So how do you know? And how can you prove that they were using? You can't really prove that. That is difficult to make it a level four. Who am I
Change.
as a classroom teacher to say, well, you know they are, there's symptoms that you can tell, but it is education. But again, they could say that I was in a car and I have the scent on me, but I was not using it. And then I never seen any of them possess any drugs. So I can't point the finger either way. So I just,
Okay, so the woman you see up here behind the two gentlemen in the suits, she continues the conversation we were just listening to. He starts to engage in a back and forth about school site operations inside the 21st century. From what you can gather in the video, she's talking about what is actually happening versus what should be happening. Now, before we get into any of that, I think it's important for us all to try to have a really simply put baseline understanding of the issue at hand here. So I'd like to call your attention to this article. This is a summary of a think tank that took place in 1972 at Syracuse University. So 4 years before my mother joined kindergarten at Delaware Annex, a group, there was a community session held at SU, which looked at the issues of using and possessing substances in schools. So that's like 52 years ago, right? We're not going to look at this whole article because it is almost 300 pages long, but I do want to highlight just a couple parts in this for everyone. So let's look at these five analysis. Let's look at these five questions. It says that in final analysis, success depends on facing and answering several questions. These questions can be paraphrased to fit the topic here. For what kinds of parents, teachers, administrators, and children is drug education appropriate and valuable? What happens to students in drug education? Can teachers be trained to handle drug education? How can the resistance from children, teachers, and administrators and parents be surmounted? And should participation in drug education be required of teachers, children's parents, and administrators? So it also goes on and talks about the position of local government, right? And it explains that, let me pull it up on the screen for y'all right here. During the legislative session in 1970, 65 million was appropriated for the development of youthful drug abuser programs. It also says that the community was involved in the development of these programs and that matching state that the locality, so like the school or whomever, had to put up a local share, which was generally 50%, and then those funds would be matched. It says that in Onondaga County, the Department of Mental Health had already been involved in drug abuse programs, and the county executive designated the mental health department as the authorized agency to receive these funds. It also says that the Bootsie School Education Program was under the same appropriation. It says that the St. Joe's Methadone Maintenance Treatment Program was under this appropriation as well. And it goes on to talk about the funding a little bit more and states that not only did the county mental health department was responsible for supervision of the funds, they were, of course, responsible for supervising the program itself. So that gives you an idea of 50 years ago how the community and the local government was dealing with youthful drug abuse. Now today we know that it is still a problem, right? And as you just heard for yourselves, we're still 50 years later that we're still having trouble answering some of those questions. So, can teachers be trained in drug education? It looks like maybe not, or very hard to do, or they don't, right? So we're still struggling there. That's still not being delivered well. Um, in light of that, we can have a little bit of a back and forth about, okay, so we know what they were doing then, what's happening today, and what's going to happen in the future. So, what's happening today, it was kind of hard to get the gist of it from the video footage that was available on the work session. But, there are, some traditional things here where we can lie on some of what of a common sense situation, right? So we know, according to the code of conduct, that if a teacher suspects a student of using drugs, they contact the nurse. What happens, or what is supposed to happen after the nurse is contacted? Um, Generally speaking, the presumptions here is that it ends up in family court, right? Like they're held liable. They go through DSS or OCFS, and then they appear in family court, and then the family court works with the family and the judge to figure out the care plan and address the problem for the child. Okay, at least that's what I have always grown to know and assumed. That was what was told to me, and as far as my understanding of how the schools were meant to work. Now, we had an interesting news piece come up a couple days after that Board of Education work session here in the city of Syracuse. And I'm going to share that with you guys because it talks about what I just said. It talks about children in family court. And we're going to use this article to transition into the bigger context of the conversation here as to why we're still struggling 50 years later and what we can do about it. So that news article came from cnycentral.com, and it is this article. It says, what are parents' legal responsibilities for the actions of their children? And there are various quotes in here from the district attorney, who is responsible for overseeing our court system here, and that includes criminal court and family court. His office is in the criminal courthouse, which is probably why they have a picture of the criminal courthouse. But let's just go ahead and take a look at what he says about getting about whether or not children are going to appear in family court. Now, in this context, this article doesn't talk about the schools. It's talking about children vandalizing cars. Now, it may not say schools, but we know using critical thinking skills that this article is talking about the same children, or at least some of the same children, right? Same children, same area, similar struggles. So it says the problem is that the kids committing these crimes or committing these horrible acts, there's no one to hold them accountable at home. Sometimes the parents are non existent. Sometimes these children are being raised by other children. Sometimes they're being raised by grandparents. Goes on to quote him as saying, "It is not illegal in the penal law of the state of New York for a parent to allow a child, irresponsibly as it may be, to walk the streets at 10:30 p.m. You have to have some other facts, such as I know my child is carrying a firearm, I know he's going to do some nefarious act, and I'm just going to let him do it. To prove something like that is so rare and so difficult. The family court system is designed to reunite biological parents with their children," said Mr. Fitzpatrick. "Maybe it's time to revamp those rules." And I just have to say that this phenomenon that's happening here, where everyone is talking about accountability but nobody wants to be held to account, or we're talking about accountability for a group of people who aren't really ever included in the discussion, is a really big hindrance when it comes to unraveling the layers of chronic absenteeism and getting every child performing at grade level and reaching success. Okay, it is. You can't solve a problem with somebody without having them included. Okay, I can't take a family member to rehab and get and have them have services without their participation or some crazy legal documents which say do it without I can do it against their will. Okay, you can't do that. So in the big picture, when we're looking at holding accountable, we really need to start thinking about what is accountability here. What is accountability when it comes to using and possessing drugs for children in schools? Okay. Who is accountable? Are the parents accountable? Yes, absolutely. They need to be involved in this process. But should it be done without them? No, it shouldn't. Should it be done on a muted microphone? No, it shouldn't. Should the process be an unknown thing where nobody really understands it and everybody from the police department to the schools to whoever is passing blame? No, it shouldn't. Okay? The first thing that has to happen here is to be clear that this is a thing. It's a problem. It's not going away, and it is an issue, right? So our schools, they're really big right now, and the priorities are pulled all over the place. And we only ever talk about this every year as it comes up in the code of conduct, but you don't hear the messaging coming out of school sites saying, vaping is really dangerous. We're not participating in vaping. You don't see schools sending public cease and desist notices out to the local businesses who are selling these this equipment to minors, right? And I mean local businesses who are selling, not the big corporations, the local businesses. A local cease and desist. It's disrespectful to our students. We would appreciate your support in not doing it anymore. There's no clear messaging coming out of the school building as to where the position is on this. Now, we can go back to some of those other questions. Is drug education important, and for who? Yes, drug education is important, especially in 2024. The drugs are changing. They are getting more dangerous. They are synthetically made, and we have people nutting out all over our downtown or across the street from where we send our high schoolers to transport themselves to and from school, right? So, yes, drug education is important. At the minimum, what do you do if you see somebody overdose on drugs? How do you respond? How do you help? What is the Good Samaritan law? All of those things can be pushed in a way that they're not being pushed. In the last 50 years, we've been combating this problem from a position that says everybody is sick and this problem impacts everybody, and none of them can help us because they're all part of the problem. And it's stabbing our schools in the foot. Stabbing our schools in the foot. It goes straight back to that bad parenting description where everybody is sick and needs help, and there's no talent in the parent pool to be celebrated or to be youthful, right? And that is just that's an offensive position. So yes, I get that maybe statistically or with the science, right? A lot of people in the Syracuse area are using drugs, okay? But that doesn't mean that anybody wants to be disrespected or put down or just have that assumption made by them. There shouldn't be no public. You're not going to have a good relationship there if you can't, put those assumptions aside, if you can't act out of those assumptions. And I can tell you, and I can give you personal stories and experiences where I have to where those assumptions hold true to me. Okay, I deal with drug abuse with my family members. And I have gone through therapy sessions or counseling sessions, and I've listened to what they've had to say. And when I have my own chip on my shoulder, and I'm like, no, you're just, it doesn't give anybody any room to do any good. So even when they want to do good, even when they want to show up and hand out birthday presents, and even when they show up sober, the room for that positive growth and bonding experience isn't there. It isn't there. And that is the same experience that's happening in our schools. We've just cut ourselves off at the ankle, and we can't get any farther in this because of the agency's own biases. They exist and they're there. And I'm not saying throw all the science out the window. Use the science. Have the drug coaches partner with your Medicaid cash cow Helio. Do whatever it is you got to do, right? But don't. You still have to do that in a way that gives room to move past that. You have to do that in a way that gives room for those parents who aren't getting high with their kids, who aren't sending their kids out to push drugs, who are home for dinner, who keep them in the house at 10:30 at night. Those children who have parents like that are still going to have to deal with exposure and peer pressure, and they still need the clear communication and the guidance and support in these areas. Now, is it the DARE program? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I did DARE. I graduated my DARE program. I hold whatever, read a speech, a whole clap award, blah, 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 blah. I still experimented with drugs. So, what we need here, what would help us here, is if we stopped passing accountability back to, oh, is it the police who are not filling out the paperwork? Is it the school board who's not, or is it the school nurse? Is there some type of cover up behind there that's not allowing the referrals to get pushed into family court? Is it the district attorney who's just too wrapped up in foster care cases than to handle the misdemeanor offense cases for children, or to handle the criminal cases with children? Stop it. Stop it. Somebody somewhere has to say stop. And we've started that. We have teams of people in the community who are like, okay, we need to evaluate this. But that evaluation is going to take a real long time. In the meantime, we would greatly benefit if we could just start using genuine, accountable talk. Okay? Now, this school district has spent 700, almost $800,000 on accountable talk training in the past year. Okay, and accountable talk, when you look at the curriculum for it, it's a real good baseline for accountable talk in the classroom for behaviors and single behaviors. But it is the perfect curriculum for dealing with drug use and possession in our schools. Okay, it is very good. And you don't even have to start with just that topic. Let's just look at the code of conduct to our principals who love the children and love their job and love doing what they're doing. I know you guys don't like the code of conduct. I get it, but you gotta use it. Okay? Take your code of conduct and it becomes your best friend. When you talk to your children, yes, that is a good example. That is a great example of what our code of conduct says. That is a violation of code of conduct, page 24. Excuse me, just a reminder, that is a level 3 offense in our code of conduct. This is your first and final warning because it's a level 3 offense. All day long. Nobody knows what that code says. You have to teach it. You have to push it out, and you have to push it out clearly. If that is your guide, if that is your document, if that is your resource, then use it. Use it the same way I use it with my family members when I say, I'm locking my door at 10 o'clock, and under no reason am I going to unlock this door because this is a boundary for me and you're not breaking it. If I let you inside, you're not leaving my house after 10 o'clock. That is a boundary for me, and you're not breaking it. Okay? It took me multiple years to set the boundaries with the people I needed to set them with. I used broken record. I had stressful days. I had days where it didn't go well and I lost my shit, but I woke up the next day and I did it again. And to our principals, that is waking up the next day, grabbing that code of conduct and carrying it with you in the hallways. To our teachers and our team teachers, that is using the code of conduct every day, pushing it out there. What are those values? What are those ideals? Good and bad, okay? Not just negative, good and bad. Be clear. We need to be clear here. We need to set boundaries here. All right. Now, yes, I get it. It is hard to set those boundaries when the kids are going home and the parents may be condoning the behaviors that aren't necessarily appropriate in schools. If you set those boundaries, use the tools you have. Okay. Give it a couple years. Push those tools. Push them. Push what you have and use them. And when you start using it, when you actually start using that document, you will see clearly the areas in that document that work really well and the areas in that document that need more work. You will see clearly those lines and how to push that document out and how to enforce it will become much more clearly to you. Talk to your other principals at the other school sites. Break the silos in this system, okay? And dig your toes in. And to the parents who are probably called me a Karen 20 times by now, I all for privacy in your own home. That's great. Privacy in your own home. But I think that we, as a group, I think we all want our schools to be safer and more successful. And if we want our schools to be safer and more successful, my message to the parents is we're going to have to compromise here, right? So we just have to compromise. We have to be talking to our kids about these things. We have to be asking our kids about these things and checking in with our kids to see if they know about something that's happening in the schools that might not be aware of. Like there's been situations where we've had horribly sexually awful graffiti in the bathroom walls, and the principals just don't notice it because everyone else is talking about it, but we never remember to communicate it to them. We need to count clear accountability and clear talk here. Okay, firm boundaries. That's not going to solve all of the problems that the using and possessing substances in the school has. It doesn't solve the system problems as to whether or not the referrals are going in and whether or not the referrals are actually getting acted upon at OCFS or the Office of Mental Health and then into family court. It doesn't solve that problem. But to the people who will go to work every day, use your tools. Okay, use your tools and just try to have a little bit of faith in in the communication methods that are relied upon. Broken record is a communication method that psychologists and psychiatrists use all the time. Okay, use it. Take your tool book, take your code of conduct, use it. Print out the pages, hang it up, play with it, cut and paste the things that are the most problems in your specific school site, send it out in a one-page flyer, right? Use the tools you have. Let's be accountable here. Okay, what happens in our homes happens in our homes. That's private stuff, but that's not just because things are happening in our home doesn't necessarily mean every single parent is okay with their kid being an asshole in the school site. And when you assume that, you lose the ability to get help. You lose the ability to get the support that you need. And I'm watching this community just jump around. And I imagine this entire country as just jumping around. Like, oh, well, over here, and oh, well, we don't want to upset them, and oh, well, they make us nervous, and oh, well, there's more than there are of us. Just your rules and your boundaries and push them out. Okay? Push them out. Just because a person is smoking some pot doesn't mean that they're smoking pot with their kid every day when their kid comes home from school. And you have no room to make that assumption. And when you make that as an assumption about numerous multiple families, you end up in this position right here where you are, 50 years in the same spot. In the same spot. It's just getting worse. We have the tools here. We have plenty of tools here. That code of conduct is thick and wordy and has a lot of baggage in it, but the only ones who can clean it out are all the principals. And I get what you're thinking, principals. I can hear you. Well, we've been complaining about the code of conduct and we've told them. And you're right, you have told them. And you're going to keep telling them. But you're going to if you want to, of course, use it. Use it. Implement it every day. Keep it in your hand. It becomes common practice. Take note of the differences. What parts are working and what parts not. Because just saying this is too much, normal people don't understand it. That's not going to cut it. We need to get into that tool and figure out what parts we like and what parts we don't like. And another thing, using and possessing, right? Those are two very different things, and they should have two different responses. Okay, so they don't go the same way. They have different implications and they mean different things and they need different types of supports. So that's something to think about too, because when you put it all in one little box like that, it's not going to fit. Okay, you don't solve drug addiction or alcoholism by wrapping it all up into three little lines and saying, oh, that's great. No, you need some real live things here. If a person has a dime bag in their pocket and they get caught with that at school, that should not be the same offense as having 14 dime bags and three different substances in their pocket. Okay? There's a difference there. And in this community, we're not going to get rid of the drugs. This is central New York. New York State as a whole is on the border with another country. You can't get anywhere through New York State without at some point traveling through Onondaga County at least a little bit. We have one of the oldest histories in New York State. These drugs are not going to leave. They're not going to leave. There's money in them. There's blah, 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 blah. History. You guys know it. I don't have to tell you guys. We all know what's happening with rebirth. The drugs aren't going anywhere. So if the drugs aren't going anywhere, then we need to change our response to that. And we need to be prepared for that. And any drug education that we give needs to be focused around the reality of whether you're a drug user or not, you're going to encounter people on drugs. You are going to encounter drugs. You are going to see drugs. Okay? And what do you do? And what are your choices? And what are your options? And what are the good and bad? They're not leaving this city. They've never left this city. They were here before we built the schools. They were here when we built the railroads. They're not going anywhere. And to operate this on a situation where we're either going to ignore it or we're going to operate as if the goal is to eliminate it is setting yourself up to fail. You're setting yourself up to fail. And this is too important. This is too important to operate in that way. And we just really got to talk this out. Like I can't stress it enough. And we got to repeat ourselves over and over and over again. Are people going to be unhappy? Yes. If you come out and start talking about this and pushing, I don't know, whatever. Let's just say DARE because it's common. If you start pushing the DARE program through the Syracuse City schools, are people going to be unhappy? Yeah. Is DARE the right program to pick? Maybe, maybe not. Not if we've got a bad relationship with the Syracuse Police Department. Why pay to train our kids with the drug education program by trainers that they already have biases against? Okay? And I'm not saying you're going to find the perfect program to train them, but maybe you hire an expert and you build your own program. I don't know. I mean, we can brainstorm ideas all day, but what we're doing right now, what we've been doing for 50 years later, to still be struggling with how we train our teachers to address these things, knowing that this problem is significantly larger and worse, that's a that's a threat. That's a threat to success that really has to be taken into consideration. If you can't train your teachers, what can you do? You can, to an extent, train your kids. You have permission, I'm pretty sure, to do drug education and health classes and such, at least here in New York State. So what does that training consist of? Where is our vaping litigation money? What are we going to do with it? Can we take that vaping litigation money and build on it? Can we expand it? Are we going to just put up flyers? Are we going to engage the families? Are we not? What are we going to do? Right? Because this is a mutual situation. We all need to come to an understanding that if this is happening in our school sites, that there will be consequences. No parent in this city is going to be like, oh, well, I don't think there should be consequences if my kid brings drugs to schools. Nobody's going to say that. Okay? What it's going to boil down to is how those consequences come of happening, right? Because if you just go out tomorrow and you all of a sudden everybody from the past 8 months gets summons into family court, yeah, they're going to be a little ticked off. But if, beginning of next year, you send out one of your little public notices and you actually flash it all over the media instead of just putting it on your website, and you say, this is our policy, these are the procedures, these are the expectations, and this is your notice of this, it could and will happen this year. That's all we want. That's all I want, and I think that's all a lot of people want. We just need a little bit of clarity here. Who to call if we need help? If our kid is getting high, who can we call in the school that's going to help us and not automatically assume we're feeding them the drugs? Who do we call if we think our kid is dealing in drugs and we don't want them dealing in drugs? Okay, right? None of that's clear, and it's all just rabbled up in all this mushy gushy stuff where you think that we're not mature enough to handle these conversations. If we can have the kids, if you expect us to drop them off to you every day and on time, then give us a little bit of credit. Give us the opportunity here, a new opportunity. Not, oh, we've done this in the past, and in the past it hasn't worked. That needs to go and stay in the 19th century. We need to talk about this here today and what the expectations are with this. And everybody, district attorney, board of education, mayor, county executive, police department, need to come to a really clear understanding on what their roles are. Because everybody I just said plays a role. They all play a role. And when you're dipping and dodging and moving like this, and nobody wants to be honest about what their role is, we end up in disasters. We end up in death, jail, other types of horrible, dangerous traumas, just like Chief Cecil says. That's it. We need to work on this accountability phenomena here. Whatever this is, to where it's just kind of rolling around like a tumbleweed, we need to work on that. And it's possible, but you got to include somewhere. You got to include the families. And at the minimum, you have to post the notices when you make the decisions. And make those decisions, and then carry on with them.